All right, we are live. A little sticker came up. So I have some very special guests today. Chris Rohaly in Flora, Indiana, right? Down in Flora.
Correct.
Yep. And Ian Bowman, Pittsburgh, near the Pittsburgh area, I believe, right?
Philly, other side of the state.
Philly.
Yep.
Oh, Philly. All right. So the other P and a P state. So all right. So
Yep.
I'm at least in the right state. So
Close
I'm Charles. Yeah. I'm Charles Elwood with SolisMatica. I do BI consulting, but I'm also have a renewed interest in renewables like solar and hydro fuel cells, all kinds of sustainable renewable energies. And I'm seeing a spike in clients in that area. So I'm combining BI and data with energy now, and it's a really rewarding path to go on to. I'm just built, I found, to help others succeed. I want to see people grow. And, that's kind of why I do, there's a Lego League team I do at elementary schools, and I try to get kids interested in STEM. And my whole purpose I found is, I just hope one day those kids that grow up become the next, Elon Musk or Einstein or whatever, and look back, is like, man, Mr. Elwood helped me, change my trajectory and become something great and make an impact in the world, right? So I'm a visionary futurist. I love developing people and helping them get to their most, provide the most impact to the world. And I love learning, seeing patterns in data. And we brought Ian on the show today, who is also a BI consultant who has spent years in the energy industry, and Chris Rohaly, who's spent since 2008 in solar, but many years before in electronics and radio for automotive. And we have some great stories today, Chris, on marketing and how you generated some walk-in clients, right? It's fascinating stuff. But maybe we start out with quick introductions. And if there's anybody in the audience member, so I've got about 3 questions that are really gonna, entice some interesting conversation from Chris and Ian about the energy markets that we hope to provide value to the audience. And then we're hoping to go to audience questions for you guys. So we're going to keep this interactive and bring in audience questions. So Chris, take it away maybe with why you got into this and, kind of, and start from the beginning, the work we were doing at Delphi too.
Sure. Well, I can go back before that, but I won't go as far back, or I at least won't tell you how far back. I pretty much got a job in automotive electronics straight out of college.
Wow.
The electrical engineer. And sometime later, Charles, sometime not quantified, I met you working here nearby here in Cocoa, Indiana, at Delphi. It was Delco Electronics at the time, a division of GM. And automotive electronics is a fascinating world. The product we design and build, it's all DC electrical, and as my friends in aerospace said, our whole product line lives its life every day in what they consider the launch environment. So it's very quality focused. It's very failure mode. Designing for and around failure modes to make sure that someone can get in the car and not have a trouble for 10 years. That's the goal. So yeah, that's kind of what we were working on. But in 2008, there were some extenuating global financial circumstances, and a coworker and I really were interested in trying to find ways after the economic collapse of addressing our parents' needs on fixed incomes for reduction of their bills. In a lot of the stimulus ideas that followed, there were talks of carbon markets, and that's when the first broad tax credits for renewable energy purchases were enacted. And but the more we looked at it, the more we realized, electrically anyway, a lot of this is stuff that we've really it's parallel to stuff we've been working on for a long time. So we brought this automotive quality ethic into the renewable energy field. We already understood a lot of the technical design challenges. And so since then, we've been doing solar here in the Midwest. I did it kind of on a moonlighting basis for several years, but once we grew to a sufficient size, this is what we've been doing now for years.
So can I just quickly to go back to when it grew to a sufficient size? So then you started this full time. What was that like? Was there, first couple of days? I mean, there must have been some fear, some excitement. I mean, just talk about, because yeah.
It was terrifying in a lot of ways, because, straight out of college, going to a job with a defined salary and defined benefits, and a defined work hour, a work week, right? So very rigid structure. Plus, not only that, when you work for a large enterprise, you learn your job. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter on what scale you go to. If you are responsible now for the breadth of an operation, a business operation, you'll find a whole lot of little things you were never trained for, despite your impressive degree. Yeah. And so, it was. I'm still learning stuff that really probably just really basic things that like business students would have learned and laughed at me about, and or construction foreman. Because it's just a night and day difference from a technical design desk job.
Right. Wow. So I've gone through that similar experience, a year ago now, where first couple of weeks I was like, what do I do with my time? That was the strangest thing is like, before you had this calendar and Outlook and you could see the meetings, right? Oh, I got to prepare for this meeting. Like now it's like I have freedom to choose what to do with my time, and you have to choose wisely. And some days it's, learn something new that you never had the skill set to do before, like marketing or doing live videos. That's something I've had to learn. So no, this is some great insight. And Sherry, I want to recognize. So Sherry Enger just said hey, and then Tyler Bedhauser said hey, and he's like, this is some data. I really like to understand is. The entrepreneur's journey. And then, we're going to talk a little bit about, the marketing, the stuff you're learning, the experiments you're running, right? You're doing Facebook, you've got a new building. So we'll come back to that, Chris. So Ian, we're going to jump to you and kind of give your energy story, which interestingly, I've known you for, I don't know, it's been months now, but I haven't heard about that side of things as much. So I'm curious to hear about, the energy side of your story.
Yeah. Thank you. So I was first interested in renewable energy, solar specifically, more than any of the others. Starting about 7th grade, I did my 7th grade science fair project on solar houses and built my little solar house out of balsa wood or whatever other cool stuff, and little DC and little tiny solar panel, right? So I loved it. I was hooked. But when I came out of college, and went to work in an energy company. At first, it was a utility, and I was there for a very short time because deregulation was just coming on along, right? And and as we were starting to do product development, things like that, it was clear that some of the things that we were working on should really be over in this deregulated subsidiary. Deregulation being like, hey, you can buy energy from multiple different companies, but the normal utility company will deliver it over the wires, right? So it's kind of a financial transaction thing. Anyway, headed over there, and this was just as deregulation was starting. There were no software systems or anything like that to handle it. So I really, once we figured out that we needed to just learn how to sell electricity before we did lots of other product management stuff, right? Yeah. Got busy with building the data systems that were used for that, and building the processes in the company and that sort of thing. And then over time, over the decades, kind of moved from that process centric, how do we do this, to more product centric. What are clients looking for? Are they just looking for lowest price? Are they looking for lowest price plus greenest? And what does that actually mean, right? So a lot of those sorts of things, and ultimately ended up working for a company that, a large global financial / energy company that's decarbonizing completely their portfolio. Yeah. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. I got to meet a lot of customers along the way who were trying to make decisions about their energy, and especially around price at first, but then around other factors too. I should say that my first job in energy was called Smart Grid. No, it wasn't called Smart Grid. It was before Smart Grid, but that was what it was wanted to be, right?
Yeah.
Utilities are gonna have a thing where, you know, they can communicate with you through it and over the power lines and things like that. It was pretty funny because if you plugged in like a baby monitor, you know, one house over, it would suck the signal out of the wire, and so it was way too early for any of that nonsense. But and apparently they found other ways besides power line carrier to get communications around, you know, satellites, wireless, all those kind of good things. So anyway, that was a lot of it. Yeah, that's kind of the background, but really an enjoyable journey in energy. I'm taking a little break now and doing lots of different things with BI, but I imagine that I will get back into the energy industry when it's time.
Wow. All right. And the BI, so Work Adaptive is your BI side of the business. And has it been about a year for that now too, or how long has been?
Yeah, coming up on 2 years actually.
2 years.
So it's close to 2. And so yeah, that's a lot of the types of situations that I was in. The products that I was managing were kind of consulting plus software, doing projects for clients and that kind of thing. So I tend toward that. Like I don't work for manufacturers per se. I work for more construction, consulting, you know, brain meets, you know, got to go out and make something happen in the field kind of companies.
Right. Okay. And then, so, you know, same question to you. So 2 years ago, if you think back, what was that transition like? You know, what was the biggest challenge? What was the biggest nugget that you had to go and learn and to make Work Adaptive successful?
I am still learning it. It's every day there's something new, right? And you know, on the marketing side, I was blessed as product manager, product director to kind of be able to, you know, shape an idea a little bit, and then there were a bunch of people that would take it and go make it into a bunch of different marketing materials and get it out there to the world, right? And so that I think is especially one of the challenges. Learning Power BI, you know, it looks simple and it is until it isn't, and then you get DAX-Wall and all those kind of things, right? And learning at the same time as a lot of the other stuff, it's a lot, but I love it. I love the learning aspect of it. Everything new every day, almost everything new every day. But yeah, good.
No, it's, you know, that reminds me of, I joined a group called Surge, and they have a boost camp for startups. And you know, that was it was actually, I was still in the corporate world and I was thinking about, you know, starting my company. And I remember joining this group, and we were having, I think, weekly meetings. And I remember going into one meeting, and I got up, and you know, somebody asked me what that was like, you know, because I was going through that transitioning of leaving the corporate world, starting my company, and it was great to document and kind of talk to people about that. But I remember telling the audience, you know, starting a business is like taking all of your greatest fears and every day addressing one, just punching one in the face, because that's how it felt for, you know, the first 3 weeks. It's like, oh, wow, now I got to go talk in front of a crowd. Now I got to go stream live. It's like, now I got to go on a sales call and talk to people. It's like every single day was yeah, it was super.
You don't always get to pick which fear shows up that day, right, Charles?
Yeah, exactly. It was
too, right?
Yeah. It's they come and find you, all your fears. So I have great respect for anybody that has gone on this journey before and during, and you know, is thinking about it, because all your fears come to mind. So, and then Sherry jumped in and she said she's been in wind for 20 years. So Sherry, we need to connect, and I hope to get you on the show because you know, the last couple of weeks I've done fuel cells. This is my second one on solar energy. And, you know, I want to hear about wind. And I've got another friend who grew up with me and went to high school with me in the Netherlands, who's in Montana, because there's a lot of wind in Montana, I guess. So he's in Montana working, installing wind farms. So there's a lot of wind farms out that way. So Chris, let's jump back to you and about your story about kind of how you've been learning about SEO, about your website for solar, about that journey, and then your latest discovery. You did a test recently, and it was kind of by accident, sounds like, because you had to move, and then you increased the number of walk-ins, right? So that was interesting. Tell us that story.
Yeah, our previous offices had been, and our warehouse had been a part of a business incubator. And the incubator, it was affiliated with one of our state universities here, and they do, they do a very good job promoting the incubator and its services, but there was really not heavy marketing. Marketing is still done to an individual. It's left up to individual companies. There is no blanket marketing approach that can work for everyone. And also with the incubator, we're kind of limited on locations and visibility, because that property has been, in this case, it was donated to them. So it wasn't necessarily a high business traffic area. So we needed a little elbow room, and we're looking ahead, trying to put in our 5-year plan of when to move. And then suddenly one of the fears that you talk about popped up, and they needed our space to offer to a much larger client. And so we lost our lease. And that's how it was not on my plan to move this year, but we moved this year. We moved the entire operation. And we bought the seller called it a tired building. A real estate agent would call it deferred maintenance. And we have put a lot of work into making it usable for our purposes. And it's going to be a process for years, but totally transformed the exterior of the building. And it's in a small town, but on a busy road with a lot of through traffic. And so something that we had never considered a sales funnel or lead generation source before was our location. And now, just by being here, I had one this morning, actually, before the call. A guy walk in with some specific questions about something we have parked in the lot. And it's you can't always count on your target market driving by. That I will say. So a lot of the Q&A we get is curiosity, but we do have a residential segment, so probably a lot of those guys are gonna, and we're in farm country in a tiny town, so we've got a big focus on ag markets, and we do see a lot of agricultural traffic. So they now know we're here, and that's obvious. So that's a good thing.
Wow, that's fascinating. And
it shows up in the mortgage payment now in marketing budget.
Yeah, it's that's where do you pay for advertising? Your mortgage. But the paint job, completely worth the expense, right? Because it's bringing in people. And that leads me to, I was watching a video the other day, and the guy was talking about fishing, as a sales analogy, and if you know where the fish swim past, or that pool or that secret place, and you put your hook in there, if you advertise or target that, and what's interesting is your little fishing hideaway is a highway, where people pass, and your worm is essentially a paint job, right? And a new paint job, and then people are like, wow, that's an interesting, I'm curious, I'm hooked, I'm going to go and ask some questions. So no, that's phenomenal, interesting story on, and that reminds me of the story I was telling everybody before the show started, about, real estate. I know a lot of people search on the latest listings, and people ignore 90-day-old, they don't want to see the old ones. And I heard that one of the strategies is people will take their listings off and repost it just to get into that search engine, so people can find them. Because if nobody can find you, why have the listing? But one way you discovered is you get a new paint job, put a new building in, new company, people walk in. So fascinating story, Chris. Thanks for that. So All right, we're gonna go. We're gonna go to Ian real quick, and so Ian, you had chatted with me earlier today about some of the frictions with buying the kind of the client's journey to solar, and with the bigger companies, you have an interesting perspective, and we'll go to Chris with residential and farming too, but price you mentioned was a big friction. What are some other decision points, or kind of in the funnel? If we look at it as funnel, where do people fall off? Were there certain things that drove people away, or were certain decisions that brought people closer to the decision to go with solar?
Yeah. So let's see here. So a couple things I'll share. One is that there's a whole world of energy data and prices and that kind of thing that most people aren't too aware of around the wholesale market, and it doesn't have a big impact right out of the gate. But as markets start to mature and you get to somewhere around, I don't know, let's just call it 5 to 7% of penetration for solar, it starts to have a pretty big impact on the economics. So as each market kind of gets to that range, you get this whole other set of things that shift. And before that, you often have a lot of incentives and things like that. They're sort of designed to jumpstart the market in a given location, in a state, in a county even, right? Yeah. And, tax credits and things. Some of them are at the federal level too. But so there's sort of that pull, or that thing that helps. And then it's sort of the difference plateaus a little bit, and you have to kind of wait for the next round. So what I saw was companies that were facing that in different areas around the country. So if you're talking about like a national company, right? Yeah. They might have locations all over the country, and they sort of had to think about it on a case-by-case basis. And so some of the things that came into to play on the price, right? You could get it usually down, let's say even in 5 to 7 year payback kind of range with incentives and everything like that. And that sounds pretty good, right? But that capital that they would ultimately put toward that was, they were thinking about it like, oh, what else could we do with this? Because there's a limited pool of capital. So it might be that, well, we could do this other IT project, and that's got a 1.5 year payback. Or we could do this thing that would expand our product line. That's got this, we think that has this impact. And so they weren't necessarily thinking about like the old price of energy versus the new price of energy only. They were thinking about it like, what could we do with our capital overall? So that's one of the challenges that the energy industry doesn't tend to think about, but clients definitely think about, right?
Interesting, yeah.
Yep. And so there were other models like leasing or whatnot, but that gets into some, okay, now you're into negotiating about what exactly you can do with my roof and things like that. So that becomes a little bit of a friction point. And so there were, some clients overcame some of those things by saying, well, we as a company believe that, that this is the right thing to do. We've got, we know we've got people all over the place, in different markets, but we're going to add extra incentive as a company, let's say in the form of a internal carbon cost, or a brand push, a strategic initiative to do something, because we believe it's good for, for us to learn how to do it. We believe it'll be good for the people that buy our products to perceive us as leaders in this space. And so those are some of the more strategic, I'll call it like leadership reasons. That doesn't necessarily translate really easily to, and then the rest of the market just follows along and does the same thing. A lot of the rest of the market that isn't taking that leadership mentality, is a bit more cost conscious and, and whatnot. So I think those are some of the things that kind of come to mind. As we chat, probably more pop into mind here.
So let me, no, those are great. So I wrote down some notes that you said there was kind of a penetration threshold and maybe kind of a tipping point, right? If there's a certain penetration, it helps. And I'm wondering if that causes more, there's a visual, people see more of the fields of panels, and then they're more inclined to go search around and it's like, oh, they've got solar. How do I get it? So Chris, I'm leading these into you. So if you can kind of comment on if there's a lot of referrals in terms of, you've been installing, and then do they tell people, and then do they come to you? The other thing is allocation. That's an interesting one in terms of, do the farm industry and the residential, if how they think about that, because we heard from Ian about that cost allocation, the trade-offs. That's $5,000, and yeah, that's a new deck or furnace, whatever. Now I'm going to spend this on this. So I want your input on that, and then and this may not be, well, this could be relative too. If there's some type of carbon payback or credit, which is, I was thinking, in European companies, and we have some investors from Europe. Do you see anything like that in some of the farm? Because I think there are some European-owned farm equipment or farm companies. If they transfer some of those credits stateside, and that's influencing some of the decisions, right? So yeah, tell us about the Indiana market and the two markets you serve. It sounds like we're residential and farming, right?
Yeah. So farming, I guess we can consider basically commercial, small commercial, something less than a megawatt typically. And we see exactly what Ian described. I mean, with slight variations, right? And to some degree, it plays out even in residential. And the idea is, if you're not financing a system, and we'll go back to other sales models in a minute. But if you're not financing a system and you're doing an upfront purchase, there's an opportunity cost, no matter how good a deal it is. Most of us have limited access to funds, and you have to choose what to do with those funds, and conversely, what not to do with those funds. And that's the decision you're making when you choose to go solar. In any kind of incentive-based sale, which renewable energy right now, there are tax incentives. We have encountered farmers who make the decision to go or not to go based solely on their tax liability. They say, I'm going to do this because I know it's a long-term purchase. I know it's going to do me good over the long haul, but I bought a combine last year and I'm still depreciating it. So I'm not going to do it until I can use the tax benefit. So that becomes almost, it's an incentive, but it's also in certain circumstances a disincentive. So that I find interesting. We have the same kind of things working on some multifamily dwelling projects for a contractor, and some of the choices they have is, all right, are we gonna upgrade to granite countertops or put solar?
Yeah.
Right. So it's strange trade-offs, ones that you and I don't often have to make, but it's all about your customer's business, and understanding the decisions they're facing is absolutely necessary if you're going to succeed in selling them something that both of you love afterward.
Interesting.
Residentially, we do see a lot of cases where it's like, oh, you know what? I was just about to sign this contract, and then my water heater broke. Or, my car broke down. So it's like, I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to wait till I pay this off. So
interesting. So price is a big one, and timing of when that cost comes in sounds like for residential. Because if you've got another expense, a big expense on the house, that'll take that fund set away from that decision. Tax incentives is you said it could be a benefit. They could use it for depreciation, it sounds like, and take away some of the tax liability. But if they've already got some other depreciation, then it's a disincentive because they want to push it out. But that is one that's fascinating because it's more of a long-term, multi-year thinking process through that. So So that's an interesting one. And then are there does anybody come in and say, I want to create a sustainable future? Is that a big incentive? Is that anybody making decisions on that? Or is it more, the financial items that drive the decision?
More on the residential side, obviously, than
Yep.
anything. Although we did a sizable system last year for a private college.
Yep.
That had in their charter that they had a roadmap to being carbon neutral.
Interesting.
Now there was still a bidding process for that business because they don't want to be irresponsible with their funds, but
Yep.
they're a non-taxable entity, so they didn't have any tax benefits available to them. That really stretches out their payback, but they had a goal that was not possible to measure in dollars and cents. So
right.
That's part of their mission and how they market themselves to potential students. So.
Interesting. So taxes, other expenses, trade-offs, and then here we're seeing the credit that Ian talked about. Then we'll just jump to you, Ian. While you were thinking there, did Chris trigger any other, on that buyer journey?
On the buyer journey, no. But if you don't mind, I've got a question for Chris that I think just
Sure.
because of your background with automotive, right? So, and DC systems. So, solar, often ends up in a building where AC is kind of the norm for the most part, right? But it starts out as DC, and most of the end things that it gets used for, the appliances or lighting or whatever, ultimately at the very end is DC. But in the middle, you got this AC thing, right? So I guess it's felt to me like at some point, these systems that are kind of separate and, early stage will start to merge together a little better, like HVAC and solar or something. I don't know. I figured I would just ask about that because you had the DC.
Sure. We were lucky enough to, we're not far from, and actually Charles is even closer geographically to one of the major appliance designers and manufacturers on the planet, right, Charles?
Yeah.
And what I learned was those guys, Whirlpool, they have students, grad students at Purdue University. They have a couple of different houses that they lease for their grad students so that they can, as part of their thesis statements, live in a house with the experimental appliances that they're designing and implementing as their research thesis. And one of the two houses there is a DC house. So I think what you're going to see is an acknowledgement that the AC becomes superfluous now when there is an economical source of DC power available to the individual or to the business marketplace. And with storage, it's stored as DC. So I think it's kind of happening now informally, where people on a small scale are taking RV loads. And so there's houses that we know of on the residential side where people want storage for backup or for when any grid down situation, so that they can at least run some of their loads. Once they have the storage there, they can probably get by with some DC loads in certain parts of their operation or their home. And the RV industry has a lot of 12-volt loads anyway. So especially people who opt with a small battery system and keep the whole system at 12, maybe 24 volts, they're already going to DC. And the whole camping market is kind of feeding it.
Wow. So just for some of our audience members, and it's been a long time since I've studied the difference between DC and AC. But if your overall load is smaller, DC makes more sense. And it sounds like if it's, yeah. Or you're plugging in.
I'm getting low battery warnings. Sorry about that.
Okay.
There we go.
And then AC is more for the higher loads, larger plants and stuff. Can you kind of help me and the audience on why? Is it the transmission? Or?
Yes. The transmission over long distances, the higher voltage you can transmit, the lower the loss for a given size of copper. High voltage for a given power, voltage times current is power. So, and if you're talking about copper or aluminum, whatever your conductor is, the size of that is going to be proportional to the amount of current you're transmitting. So if you can lower the current, you can control the cost of all these massive conductors. And you can see these monstrous towers holding high tension wires. Those are going by at thousands of volts. And for a number of reasons, that's a lot easier to transmit and distribute as AC voltage than as DC voltage.
Interesting. So just along the lines, Ian, of what you're talking about, so we're transmitting and we transmit with AC because the higher, we have less loss on the transmission lines. Now with solar and battery backup and generators, so you're asking if there's a shift to potentially move to DC houses because you don't have the transmission requirement anymore, right? Is that kind of...
either houses or parts of it, a subsystem. Solar tied directly to an HVAC with a bit of backup from the grid or something like that, right? Where you're not getting the loss from transforming the energy from one, to the other. So, so I'll just give you my background from kind of watching this. My frame of reference is that it feels like, okay, solar started in space, then we started using it here, but it was expensive. And we started using it here and it got a little less expensive, but it was still kind of the same form factor that was used in space, a solar panel, and it hasn't kind of become, I would say, integrated with other systems. Yeah, it's still, like if I think about, cell phones, right? It still sort of reminds me of the bag phone version of a cell phone. It's, it's got a purpose. And it's still kind of, wires and plugging and, you end up a few generations later and you've got a cell phone that does lots of things. So if I think about, solar on the roof, for example, on a residential sloped roof, well, people are still kind of having to make decisions about, okay, is my roof the right age, let's say, that I should put solar on there, or am I going to have to take it off and replace the roof? Well, that's a friction, right? At some point, Tesla and others before them and more are working on the value of the roof being the solar plus the, it as a roofing material itself, right? And as long as you can get the lifespan up and the cost down, now it's doing two things, right? And then if you also are starting to, take out other wastes in the system, like converting the energy from DC to AC back to DC as it goes into your HVAC system, for example, right? All those little things start to integrate better, and it just, it works as a system as opposed to these very kind of separate things that are strung together with wires. And interestingly, like the automotive industry, I think, is kind of neat from that perspective in that it's got a lot of that integrated design. It seems like, at least from an outsider's perspective, right, that maybe the average solar/energy person doesn't think about systems in the same way. Some do, but I imagine that many do not, right? So I just thought it was kind of a neat tie-in with that, a place that I imagine it'll get to eventually.
Yeah, I think so, and I think you've kind of hit on some of the challenges there. The transition, it is very much independent right now, right? I mean, in terms of there's a whole class of design called building integrated photovoltaics, BIPV, and that's to do kind of just what you say. And like the Tesla solar roof was probably the highest profile example of something in the class of BIPV. And that's where, use the equipment to do two functions. One is to produce energy, and two is to be something a part of the structure that it's going on, rather than just having it be an appendage. There's definitely still some challenges with that in terms of the appliances, and the intermittency of solar is something that I know it's what we hear a lot when the utility is pushing back on concepts or a push for them to have a higher or a faster adoption of the technology. But it's a very real thing, right? I mean, I can see on my own system that if I'm looking at the output on a nice little sine wave on my monitor, which I have because I'm a geek, when a cloud blows over, there's a significant dip. I mean, that's very real. If I integrate solar into the load that's using it, I have to protect against that. If the load itself can function in the presence of those dips, that's great. But in reality, we probably need to put something in there to regulate those dips and filter them out. And right now, that's batteries. And so it's the whole storage thing as an intermediate. Where we are right now with that stuff is kind of like, I don't know, because of our background, we're also still a little bit car geeks. The Chevrolet Volt is a great example of a stepping stone between, on one side of the river is internal combustion, on the other side of the river is an EV, and now you've got the Volt with both, and the gas engine is really a generator charging the batteries, and the electrical motors are the drive wheels. But for, I think, purely commercial reasons, that was the end of an evolutionary line, and they've kind of gone, all car companies have gone either to one side of the river or the other. And I think that middle ground is it's necessary for education, but it's usually unsustainable commercially when you're trying to bridge the technologies. So yeah, there's stuff coming, but I think that's what you're noticing in a lack of those applications right now is absolutely not from lack of interest in people's parts, but it's a financial thing.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Ian. So we're coming up on 40 minutes. So it's amazing that every time I do one of these shows, we go up to an hour. So I have a couple questions as fillers, but if there's any audience members that want to ask questions, I'll try to sneak them in here before the hour's over. But Ian, I think you pointed out the market right now is shifting because of COVID, because of a lot of things going on. And so, Chris and Ian, and then for the past couple of years too, has there been any new credits or any shifts, in tax laws that you saw come in that really changed, you had to adapt to or anything? So, or there's anything coming up in the next year? So I just wanted to do, a quick, study of, what you're seeing in the markets. Is COVID impacting it at all, and how is it impacting? And was there anything over the past year or coming up in the future that you're watching for? Let's start with Chris first. And
did you say start with Chris? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. Or were you thinking? Do you want me to go to Ian first?
Okay. I'm having some audio issues. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So from a tax standpoint, I don't see many new incentives coming, but I will say that I'd like you to ask me that same question in December. This presidential election, the two parties have drastically different ideas as to how to move forward with energy and bringing our energy infrastructure into its next life cycle. And yeah, so other than that, there's other than a phase out of the existing tax credit, we don't see anything new on the horizon.
Gotcha. And then did COVID impact your business at all, or was it kind of immune to that?
COVID did impact our business. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot about that part. Initially, COVID impacted our business pretty significantly. It was dead for a few months early in the year. We sent people home, in large part. But what that did, we noticed there was a time lag, and a lot of people at home got a chance to look at a lot of things they wanted to do. A lot of people were thinking about, well, oh, look at the fires in California. What happens if suddenly I now have no power? There have been a market increase in both small businesses and residential inquiries about storage, backup. So
interesting.
It's and that whole sensibility has changed. So what I'd like to see, if you were asking about that, is you talked about Europe. I don't see companies. I don't see a sign here, but that's maybe not visible to me about companies being driven by policies in Europe doing things in the U.S. There is talk of, again, a carbon-based stimulus, which that would drive us, I think, more toward what we need. The tax credit right now really only it rewards sell price. You get a bigger incentive for paying more for your system. It does not reward clever design or efficiency. And something that was carbon-based would be directly proportional to production and efficiency, which is a much smarter use of money, I believe, if you're going to offer an incentive. So that would be my hope.
Wow. No, that's great insights. Thank you. No, the backup generators, people being more aware of power outages, that's an interesting one. And then you added storage capability just recently, I think, right? To your business. Is that right? Or you became a dealer for an installer?
Well, we've actually been doing storage for several years.
Okay.
We just kind of formed a tighter allegiance now with Generac, just because we believe that, getting back to your marketing questions, Generac will have and does have name recognition that would take any other company decades to build. So
interesting.
It's also an excellent product. So it's something we're moving forward on. But we have 4 or 5 other companies that we have installed and still service, and we'll also sell. A lot of people interested here in rural areas in storage.
Interesting. No, that's fascinating. Yeah, Generac, and that's a thing I bring up too, is a lot of sales is really, do you trust somebody? And Generac has built a brand and they built the quality. So when you hear that name, you're like, okay, it's going to kick on when I'm out of power. I can trust this thing is going to provide the backup that I need. And it becomes a safety and security issue for a lot of people. So no, that's an interesting one. Thank you for pointing that out, Chris. So Ian, we'll go to you and kind of, current trends that you saw in market. If you've been watching the energy markets, is COVID, I think you've been watching other markets with COVID too. And I'd like your input maybe on, if there's anything on energy or just in data in general, how it's impacting how you see things before, during, and after this time.
Yeah. Couple thoughts. One, I think that what you're doing with Generac is really interesting, because a lot of people do come to solar sometimes with a misconception that I'm doing this because I want my lights to stay on during a power outage. And that's not necessarily the case. Just from solar, you need storage or something else, right? And so solar plus even a carbon-based generator accomplishes the backup, but also they've come in for the solar, and maybe they've gotten the solar and the generator, or even just the generator if they decide that was their main reason, right? At first, right? So I think that's a good use of taking somebody's job to be done and kind of combining it with their response to you and bringing it together. That's neat. Okay, so COVID, I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that people have increasingly, it was already well underway, and we've talked about this, but they've made a shift toward an increasingly online search and buying, or pretty far into the buying process, completely online, right? Things that used to be word of mouth, offline, talking to people when you're out to dinner or something like that, doesn't happen as often. The whole buying process, much more online. And so, for example, I have a client that's benefiting from people being at home, noticing projects they want to do at home. They build, really nice backyards and that kind of thing. But they have really invested this year in moving their customer buying experience online as much as possible, so that the customers who are looking for it, can find it and get as far down the road as possible. I don't think that's going away anytime soon, right? I think that's the shift that people it was already on its way, and it's just been accelerated, and I think that it keeps going that direction. Maybe not quite to where services are bought like e-commerce, not quite Amazon like, just buy and click with a button for solar panels, although I'm sure that's possible. But people still want to know and have relationships and that kind of thing, but just a lot more of it online. That's my sense.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I've seen that too, and I was, everybody's looking at mortgage refinances, and interest rates are low, and I stumbled upon an article about Quicken Mortgage, who's the largest, I think, mortgage company in the U.S. now, and I read about their model, and it's all online. Like, you do everything online, and then they contract a notary, to come out with the documents and sit on your front porch and right at your house, right? And I was like, wow, that is phenomenal, forward thinking, because they do everything online when everybody's trying to be careful right now, but it's so much easier too. Now you don't have to drive into the bank, and then they send the signing, it sounds like, to their clients, to their homes, and it takes out that drive and, going to the title office, kind of intimidating and stuff. So I thought that was a brilliant strategy, and I'm going to read up more on what they did, but I thought that was fascinating too. So no, thanks for that input, Ian, and I'm going to continue to watch for more examples of that. And maybe I would love to do a show on this as we see more examples of this, because there's certain companies out there that are kind of forward thinking, that are taking advantage of, putting everything online so people don't have to drive around anymore.
Absolutely. And it all, one industry impacts another, in terms of people's buying expectations. Like that, your experience with Quicken Mortgage impacts your experience or your expectation of experience with every other company you do business with. Once you've had that convenience, for example, people are pretty convenience motivated.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that some more. So, Chris, I want to end with a question, and hopefully for the audience, and this will be recorded so people can watch this too. But I was looking on Bureau of Labor Statistics and the top growing jobs, and I think solar installers was one of the top jobs in 2020 and beyond. So, just kind of your take on that, because you need to find installers. Are there certain qualities, and is it hard to find installers, right? Do you look for certain skill sets and stuff? Because solar panels, I think you said in the last one, it's an electrical device. You got current, you got voltage, you're putting this on your roof, potential fire hazard. You want people to trust that you have the right people on your roof, putting this on your roof. Have you seen a shortage? How do you find good people? Do you have a recommendation to people in the audience if they want to get into this business, go take, these classes or get skilled in this type of area?
Sure. And that's a rich topic. So first of all, I'm going to say that in terms of my outlook, a lot of our commercial opportunities this year kind of evaporated with COVID, or at least they evaporated off of the calendar year 2020 schedule. There's a chance that I have a lot more pipeline coming in 2021 which if I do, then I'm going to be one of those statistics where in order to complete them in some reasonable timeline, I'm going to need to expand in the capacity of the install force. So what I look for then is there's a couple of things. So in large part, especially commercially, there is a big chunk of the project that is really construction related. It's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of assembly that is not necessarily electrical. So those people would have to have an aptitude and an ability to work in, unfortunately, kind of temperature extremes in a lot of cases, because there's no option to do that inside, at least not yet. But then on the electrical side, this is you can't take someone who's been through a journeyman class and has an apprentice or even master electrician card and put them on the crew, because there's the DC side to contend with, and the dynamics of DC power are different, and it requires different training. So there are colleges now teaching this. In Indiana, we've got Ivy Tech. It's a 2-year vocational college. And I've got several of the crew with associate's degrees in industrial technology, renewable energy, with a focus on PV solar. So those guys, even if you're not touching the electrical, everyone has to be trained that this is serious stuff, and not paying attention to what you're doing can kill you or someone else. So that has to be front of mind in everyone on the job. So.
Right. Wow. So electrical safety, some good basics in that. Construction, you're looking for people that are willing to be outside. The conditions could be hot, cold, etc. And then
could be on a roof.
Could be on a roof. Yeah, some climbing and etc. And then there's some programs out there. There's schools starting to put programs together. So if you have that combination, and it sounds like you're looking at capacity issues next year, not this year yet, but potentially in the future that are going to pop up.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. And then, so Ian, we'll, so I want to have you kind of, help the audience here. So I was looking, one of my interns showed me a report that says BI is primed for growth right now, especially during these times. And I think it listed 3 industries that were really, really important. New technology, it's kind of an open-ended one, but they said healthcare, and I've heard this from other BI individuals too, is, typically healthcare has the larger organizations with some money to spend, and maybe after COVID, they'll be back, into BI. And then energy was the other one, which is kind of why I'm, focused on this, is like, I'm passionate about renewables, energy and data are growing together. And so just your thoughts on, if you're seeing these trends or hearing these kind of, tidbits of news that these are the ones that are growing together with data, or are you seeing other markets kind of shift into data? And if you were somebody that wants to get into it, do you have some advice for them? And I know Power BI, there's the DAX wall.
Yeah. So couple thoughts. One, I think that both of those industries can absolutely benefit from it. They, for different reasons, maybe have silos of data that when you bring them together, you get a lot more insight about, your options, your best options or better options moving forward, right? And so I think that's, to some degree, I don't think that there are very many companies that cannot benefit from it, right? So as much as anything, it's an attitude about, do I believe that I can bring these things together and get value from it? And I believe almost every company can do that, right? There are very few that don't have data lying around in bucket loads that could help them with things like marketing, growth, etc. So it's kind of a belief. It's a forward lean into technology. Those industries could definitely, they're both old industries. They've been around a long time. They've got extra bucket loads of data, right, that are extra siloed. So I think they absolutely could be. For somebody who's getting into this industry, or maybe not even the industry, who's getting into data and data analysis and that kind of thing, I would say two kind of combo things. One, don't discount the importance of your domain experience and knowledge. Some of the best things I think that happen is when you pair somebody who has a deep domain experience and knowledge with somebody who's got, some domain experience and knowledge, but a little bit more on the technical side of things, right? And I'm starting to talk about that like, a data wingman or something like that, right? I think that's part of what I do is I data wingman with people who know their business as much as they can without being deep into the technology. So Power BI, for example, looks, kind of easy. It's like Excel, but a little bit more, but really it goes deep, right? And so at some point you hit that level where, the wingmanness helps, or wing person. I just happen to be a man, right? So, so get a wing person, a data wing person, and respect that you do have a lot of domain experience, and don't try to necessarily be the full data expert and the full domain expert all at once. It's just too much, right?
Yeah,
that's my thoughts.
No, that's huge. I've heard that multiple times. It's when I partner with companies now doing their data projects, I was like, okay, there's going to be a part that I can do, but we together, if you bring your domain knowledge and share that with me, and we discover this thing together, we can really take this far. And when I start and set the expectations that way, my projects are just huge successes, right? So, but you need that domain knowledge, and for one person to do it all, I think is overwhelming, especially trying to learn Power BI at the same time. So thank you for that. So we're at the hour mark. Chris, Ian, thank you so much. I'm going to end just with two comments. One is Whirlpool does some amazing, outreach community projects with universities. And this reminds me of a story is, my senior year, or actually my junior year, I worked on a senior design project with a group of seniors. And it was a project with Whirlpool, and they were looking at a way to seal diaper. Those you put the diapers in and then you turn them. This was before I had my kids, but now I know how stinky those are. So they were looking at a better way to seal that off so the smell wouldn't, get all over your house. So that's a fun story. Is Whirlpool is pushing the edge not only of DC in-houses, they're having test markets, but they're also fixing that diaper genie and containing that smell. So kudos to them. And I love, a live show, you can just wing it and put in stories like that, right? So that, Chris, your story reminded me of my Whirlpool project. The other thing is,
I'm happy to inspire that.
And then my YouTube channel. So I think just last week, I think I put 30 videos up there now, and this one is just going to go right up there too. I have an intern writing the description and trying to put more SEO in the YouTube channel so people can find them, and I'm hoping to add more value to people's lives. And an amazing thing happened. I've been doing this for about a year, and this email gave me a summary, and it was 1,600 views across the 30 videos that I've posted, right? And I was like, wow, some of them have hundreds. And then it put a time tag of 76 hours watched. And I'm thinking, wow, that, as an aggregate, you plant these little seeds, and if they all grow and you have this huge forest, these wonderful things can happen. And I'm just creating content and value and injecting into the world. And it was great to see that statistic. But I invite you to join, anybody out there that's watching, go to SolisMatica. Search on YouTube, subscribe to my channel. And, I try not to bug you with content that's salesy and stuff. It's conversations like this that are fun. And we talk about diaper sealing or solar energy or wind or whatever that comes up, right? Interesting topics. So we're going to say bye to the audience. And Chris and Ian, if we could hang on just a second for a recap, that'd be great. So All right. Thanks for watching. Bye, everyone. All right.